Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Inside Immigration. Today, we're joined by partner Ravi Jain and Senior Associate Alexandra Cole. Please feel free to ask any questions via the pop-up text bar on the right side of your screen. We'll do our best to address your questions at the end of the webinar. If the panelists do not get to your question, you can contact them directly through the information provided on screen now. And with that being said, I'm going to hand things over to our panelists.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I guess I'll start. And yeah, we talked about the election briefly. I mean, I'm just going to briefly touch on it before we get into the agenda. Of course, there was a federal election in Canada, and the governing party, the Liberals, have once again won the election with a minority government. In terms of what's going to really change, not much. We're still going to see high levels of immigration, and that's because they've stated they believe that it's important for Canada's economic recovery to have relatively high levels. They said they're going to reduce the processing times to 12 months, under 12 months, but they have not said how. I'm assuming through technology, as we've been seeing them use innovative portals to address the fact that they have a very aging global case management system. The computer sort of platform that they're using is being replaced, and it's going to take many years for that. So I'm assuming they're going to use IT to sort of help with that, but we'll see. I get asked a lot from people who are familiar with the American system if there'll be premium processing at an extra fee, and I don't see that. They say they're going to support temporary foreign workers and Canadian employers by establishing a trusted employer stream that will streamline the process. So we'll see what that looks like. They're going to improve global talent, that stream. So, hopefully bring it back to the two-week standard. And finally, they've talked about doubling the number of Afghans. The resettlement target is going to be doubled from 20,000 to 40,000. So they made that promise in the campaign, and yesterday Minister Mendicino indicated that they are indeed carrying that forward. They've settled about 2,500 so far under private and government-assisted, refugee sponsorships. Minister Mendicino, indicated that Canada is the first country in the world to launch a humanitarian resettlement program specifically targeting women, girls, LGBTI, and targeted minorities. So that's interesting and innovative. And the objective is to settle those who are not just outside of Afghanistan, but also some that are in Afghanistan. So that's also interesting that they mentioned that. So we'll see what that looks like. But now I'll turn it over to Alex to talk about the orders in council.
Thanks, Ravi. So we're going to touch on some of the more notable updates that were recently implemented under the orders in council. These orders in council set out the travel restrictions and exemptions for travel to Canada during COVID. We can also talk a little bit about quarantine requirements and who is exempt from those. So probably a lot of us already know that since August 9th this year, fully vaccinated US citizens and permanent residents who travel to Canada from the United States have been able to enter for discretionary purposes, meaning largely tourism is open again in Canada for those persons coming from the US. More recently, on September 7th, this was extended to fully vaccinated travelers from all other countries other than the United States. So that's the most significant update we have for you today. What we did notice as well is that the rule for travel from the US was also expanded. As I mentioned previously, it was US citizens and US permanent residents who were fully vaccinated could come in for tourism. Now it actually just indicates any fully vaccinated foreign national, not limiting it to those US citizens and permanent residents. So for example, if you're a UK national in the United States who is fully vaccinated, you can also travel into Canada from the US for tourism or other discretionary purposes. It's important that you understand what it means to be fully vaccinated to take advantage of this. So Right now, Canada is only recognizing Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. Those are the 4 approved vaccines. And you have to have received your dose if it's one of the vaccines that require 2 doses. The second dose must have been received at least 14 days before your travel. So the way the government calculates this 14 days is important. I'll give you an example. So, if your dose was on July 1st, your second dose was on July 1st, the first day you'll qualify for this exception as a fully vaccinated person is July 16th. So basically you'll start counting that 14 days from the day after you received your last dose. So just make sure that you're not coming a day early by accident. You also still need to have your pre-arrival COVID-19 molecular test. Antigen tests are not accepted. It has to be an accepted version of the test, so check that before you travel. You must be asymptomatic, of course. Fill out your ArriveCAN app with all of the required information that they're requesting. And you also have to make sure that you are admissible to Canada, of course, which is no different than pre-COVID. We don't know right now if other types of tests or other types of vaccines, will be accepted in the future. We're hoping that there might be new rules coming out in the next few months, which can start to recognize other types of vaccines, but we have no update on that right now. There were also some updates in the Order in Council for travel with children. So as we know, vaccines are not yet approved for children under 12. So Canada is recognizing that and allowing unvaccinated persons under the age of 18 to travel for these discretionary purposes, as long as they're coming with their parent, step-parent, guardian, or tutor who is fully vaccinated. For people over the age of 18, they can also travel for discretionary purposes, but they must be a dependent, and that dependency must be related to a mental or physical limitation, and they also need to be traveling with a parent who is fully vaccinated. Touching on the quarantine requirements, which obviously are still important to consider, since July 5th this year, fully vaccinated people have been eligible for an exemption from the quarantine requirement. Children under 12 who are coming with a fully vaccinated parent are similarly exempt from quarantine. But during that 14 days when they, after they arrive in Canada, they are instructed not to go to group settings. So they can't yet go to school, they can't go to daycares, camps. They're supposed to avoid, crowded public transportation, amusement parks, and settings where they might come into contact with vulnerable people. So obviously, the children shouldn't be going to long-term care homes, nursing homes, hospitals, things like that. And then for children over the age of 12, or any person really over the age of 12 who is not vaccinated, you can demonstrate that you have a physician documented medical condition preventing you from obtaining the vaccine. And if that's the case, you may also be exempted from quarantine. But again, similar precautions have to be followed, avoid group settings, etc. And then just as a final note, not everyone is vaccinated, we know this. So there are still exceptions provided for in these orders in council for people who do not have a full series of a Canadian approved vaccine or any vaccine at all. Some of those, for example, are, holding a work permit, traveling for essential business, obtaining a written authorization from the government to travel if you qualify for a specific type of exception. So there are still ways you can come. It's just sometimes takes a little bit more work. So I believe Ravi is going to give you an update on the new opening of flights from India.
Yes, and one thing we talked about earlier is this, when you talk about fully vaccinated, I've heard that we may start to recognize some of the other vaccines from other countries, like whether it's COVAX from India or the Russian or Chinese one. So the orders in council don't say, Pfizer, Moderna, Astra, et cetera. It says, approved by the government. So that can change on a whim, because these orders in council will be valid all the way up till November 21st, I believe. So at any point that can change. So just you have to kind of keep a watch out for that. But yeah, about India, you have to get a PCR test, a negative test from the Genestrings laboratory, which is located above the metro station in the Airport Connect building at the Indira Gandhi International Airport. So they've been very particular about this. I'm assuming there is some fraud involved, and now this has been this is a lab that's sort of approved by the Canadian High Commission, and so they've worked with them on that. So you have to get your test done within 18 hours of your departure, and you got to present your QR code issued by Genestrings, that laboratory, to the air operator before boarding. So that's kind of interesting. Of course, there's an exception if you've had COVID, between, and your test was conducted between 14 and 180 days before the departure. That's a different situation. And the other option, of course, is to come via a third country still. So there's still that possibility. But you've got to provide that negative PCR test from the third country if you're coming in directly. Some countries won't allow you to transit from India. COVID testing for passengers who are in transit may not be available at all airports of transit countries, so be aware of that. And if you test positive, you could face a local quarantine. So that's really the India update, and I'll pass it back to you, Alex, for visitor visas.
So, anyone who is from a visa-required country needs to first apply for a visa from a consulate overseas if they want to come to Canada for a visit. A lot of people throughout the pandemic have submitted visitor visa applications, a lot of them wanting to come see their family members. Maybe they have a child who lives in Canada, or a grandchild, someone that they're coming to visit, and they've just been waiting for quite a long time. Obviously, there's been processing delays as a result of service disruptions and various issues during the pandemic. On September 7th, IRCC released an update requesting people who have pending visitor visa applications to submit a new application if their visitor visa was submitted before September 7th and they did not indicate in their initial application that they're eligible for a travel restriction exemption. So what that means is, as an illustrative example, if I'm a parent of a Canadian, and I'm a foreign national, I would have qualified as an immediate family member of a Canadian to come to Canada during the pandemic. This was a specific exemption that the government created. It's just one example of an exemption, but for parents to be able to see their children. If I have a visitor visa in process before September 7th and I didn't indicate to the government in that application that, I'm specifically exempted, they're now asking me to resubmit a new visa application. It seems that the intention of this is for IRCC to be able to easily prioritize those applications, as opposed to them perhaps being, lost in the backlog of many months. So, it's a little unclear as to how this is going to help, what happened to the first application. But what they have indicated is if you do submit a new application, it's very important that you indicate what specific exemption you qualify for, and that they will be withdrawing your initial application. So probably it would be very important as well to reference the previous file number from your initial application when you are resubmitting. They did indicate that not everyone will receive a confirmation from IRCC that the first application has been withdrawn, and there's no guarantee of a refund of your government processing fees. But I think ultimately, if you're hoping to get to Canada as soon as possible, this is probably the best way to do so. In a situation where you did indicate what your travel exemption was in your initial visitor visa application, they've told us that you're not supposed to resubmit. There's not really any guidance as to how those are being dealt with. It's a little gray right now, so hopefully we'll get a better sense of that and we can update you in the future. There is a full list of the different types of scenarios which the government is considering for these resubmissions on IRCC's website. So if you'd like more information on that, you can please contact us and we'll let you know some further info. Ravi will provide us with an update on what's going on at the ports of entry following these OIC updates and whether or not people can get work permits, whether they, what they're doing over there.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is they can. So there was a little bit of confusion because the minister published some ministerial instructions, which is kind of like a law that the minister can just, pronounce. And the ministerial instructions indicated that all applications from abroad need to be online. So then there was a question about whether or not someone who's, let's say, a European national who's visa exempt, they don't need a visa to come to Canada, they just need an electronic travel authorization. Can they get their work permit at the border? And the answer has been provided, and it's quite clear. The government has actually indicated to us that it's definitely possible to get your work permit at the border. So we're preparing packages for people, and they are getting in. They're using the Arrive Canada app, and they're getting their work permits at the port of entry. So that's the update on that. And on terms of before we go to parental sponsorship, I just see that there's a question, which is, have you started getting PGP, parent-grandparent program sponsorship invitations for your clients? And I can tell you that I got 2 today, and I got a few in the last few days as well. So the answer is yes to that. And now I'll turn it over to Alex for the update generally on that.
Yes, so I have also seen invitations coming in. And on that, definitely check your inbox, check your junk folder. Sometimes it will go to spam. So if you haven't received one, I would check all possible emails or folders that you might have gone to. So for the 2021 Grandparent and Parental Sponsorship Program, they did start issuing invitations as of September 23rd. That is expected to go for a 2-week period, and IRCC has indicated a goal of sending enough invitations to reach a goal of 30,000 complete applications. So that likely means they're sending more than 30,000 invitations and hoping for at least 30,000 complete applications to be submitted from sponsors and applicants. What's interesting about the 2021 program is it's only open to people or sponsors who were able to submit their interest to sponsor form in 2020. So no new sponsors who may have become eligible this year were able to be considered. Hopefully soon they'll open up another kind of submission for interest to sponsor forms for the next round, and people that are now eligible this year can be considered in the next round of invitations, where hopefully that will be early 2022. That's really the update for that. I guess I would say, if you do receive an invitation, please take note of the date it was received. You only have 60 days to submit your application to sponsor and permanent residence application from the date of your invitation. It's an online process, so you're going to be submitting those applications online, and try and do so at least a couple days before the deadline to mitigate against any technical issues or glitches you might experience. The portals are not without problems. There are technical problems. Sometimes we can't use certain IRCC portals, so do not leave it to the last day.
And I see another question here. Could one stay less than 14 days in Canada? If yes, how to book a hotel for a backup quarantine plan if you would stay less than 14 days? So a lot to unpack in that question. Generally speaking, yes, you can stay less than 14 days if you're, double vaxxed, you've got the negative PCR, you're coming for a vacation, either visa exempt or you have a visa. I don't see a problem with that. You don't need to book a hotel as part of your backup quarantine plan. You have to have a quarantine plan, but oftentimes you'll be found exempt if you meet the criteria that I just outlined. You know, there is a provision allowing you to leave Canada and break quarantine if you're in quarantine. You know, so there's that possibility. But if you're showing up at the border saying, hi, I'd like to come to Canada, I need to quarantine, and I plan to stay for 10 days, let's say, which is less than 14 days, that doesn't make any sense to me. The officer will just say, well, why would I let you into Canada when you're going to be spending 10 days of the 14 days in quarantine? So it doesn't make any sense. So from an you know, immigration perspective, as opposed to quarantine perspective, just basic immigration law, they'll say it doesn't seem to make any sense. In terms of the last item, processing delays, I just wanted to note that, you know, basically back in April 2020, in the major processing centers like Mississauga, there were 21 people working in the office, 30 teleworking, and 214 on leave. So 21 in office, 30 teleworking, and 214 on leave. In Edmonton, which is a huge processing center, 15 in the office, 111 teleworking, and 189 on leave. And then get this, in Sydney, Nova Scotia, another major processing center, 23 in the office, 101 teleworking, and 633 on leave. And finally in Ottawa, the CPC Case Processing Center in Ottawa, 25 in the office, 121 teleworking, and 533 on leave. So these are massive numbers of people who are on leave. We're talking like 81% in Mississauga, 84% Sydney, 78% in Ottawa, 60% in Edmonton. So this is a big problem, I would say, in terms of, you know, what's created the backlog. And I think it's quite unfortunate. I understand there are some security issues and people working from home have to, you know, the computers have to be secure and there's, you know, personal data and all that. But frankly, you know, we in the private bar as lawyers dealt with the same thing. And, you know, many of the lawyers at our firm are women and some of them, you know, parents, whether men and women of young kids. And all of us had to pivot to deal with the reality of COVID. So I find it quite shocking that there were so many people on leave. And this is what's led to the astounding backlogs that we have today. So hopefully this will be managed a bit better going forward, and we'll have people actually working, because there's a real impact that we feel in our clients' lives, and we care about our clients, you know, and it's very frustrating for us to see people's lives affected when there are these kinds of delays. And I put this, by the way, to the minister a few weeks ago directly, and said, look, you know, this has been a real problem. And he said, look, I understand, Ravi, like, yeah, it's, you know, we had a lot of people who weren't working, but it's much better now, and we're hoping to ramp things up. And again, as I said at the outset, I think they're hoping to use technology to do that. So let's hope that that happens. But that's all I have. I don't see any more questions. So over to you, Stephen, I guess.
Thank you, Ravi. Yeah, I'm just having a look here, and there's no questions coming in on my end either. So I guess we can wrap it up. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and a special thanks to you, Ravi and Alexandra, for sharing your expert insight and knowledge. If you would like to discuss today's topics in more detail, you can please reach out to book a consultation. Details can be found on screen now. And I'd like to encourage everyone as well to sign up to our alerts and follow us on social media to keep up to date on the latest developments inside Canadian immigration. So until next time, everybody, stay safe.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Alex.